As an attorney back in Oregon for many, many years, I had occasion to work with folks in various debt settlement arrangements. And one of the things that came up repeatedly was their surprise when they learned that they were going to have to pay taxes on that which was forgiven. And I'm just curious if this is an issue that should be addressed in the bill we've been looking at to address these debt settlement challenges. Should the tax exposure be something that's discussed? And I think the proper person to ask is Ms. Winslow this question. So what's your thought?
Yes, absolutely. The citizens in Oregon are not alone there. There's often surprise at the end when consumers realize that they owe additional money that they didn't know was coming, and that should absolutely be part of the disclosures that consumers have up front.
Yeah, I glanced through the bill and it didn't jump out at me, but it seemed to me that that would be something you absolutely would have to disclose at the front end. Otherwise, it's easily ignored, and then suddenly, if you draw an audit in that unlikely event, but even at some point it could become a problem. I want to shift to strict liability and tort. And we had a number of opportunities back in my law practice to bring cases in that context. And it's a device, of course, that's available when you are damaged by harm from some dangerous product. And it's there because there isn't necessarily going to be recourse in any other fashion. And it's there because there are dangerous products that make their way through this system that we put in place to try to catch all of those that aren't. Here was the problem. And when someone would come into my office and say, hey, I remember one case, it was horrid, but a young person had been dealing with one of these masks that you put on, and it has an elastic band around it, and on the end of it, it has a sharp projectile, as it turned into, and when he pulled it on, it popped off and hit him in the eye, and he lost his eye. And so the question was, who made this? Who created this thing that had this dangerous element? And so I'm asking, and I guess I'll turn to Mr. Castro first. Is this something that we should be talking about in this legislation, where we try to make people at least identify where they're from, who they are, the people producing these things, so that in the unfortunate event that there isn't someone checking on these dangerous things, there might be recourse through strict liability. I mean, and again, I can think of all kinds of weaknesses and frailties in what I'm suggesting, but please comment.
You're absolutely right. The question of liability is really important here, especially when you start talking about the online marketplaces, because the seller is different than the marketplace. So the seller is the one that might have the liability. But if you're talking about an overseas seller, you might have really no ability to have recourse. So I think that transparency is important so consumers can make good decisions. But one thing that we are seeing that's really important here is that buying on certain platforms, for example, Amazon, they've made guarantees so that when you're buying, you don't have to basically care where that seller is, because they're providing the guarantee that there'll be recourse available for you that they're adding on. And so I think that's something that consumers often aren't aware of, and that's one of the differences of American platforms. I'd like to see more platforms move in that direction so no consumers put in a situation where they have a significant harm and absolutely no recourse.
But the point you're making is that those people who choose to use that particular platform do have that extra level of protection in the event that the product is actually dangerous.
That's right.
And so that should be called out in some fashion so that when people are shopping online, which seems like everybody does now, they actually know that this extra level of protection is available. That seems to me to be something we ought to be considering here, because I'm not sure that the consumer is fully aware of that option.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the questions is how much of that should be competition between marketplaces versus mandates or guarantees pushed forth by government. But you're absolutely right. That is a central question right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this most interesting, your presentations. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.